Good morning, everyone. Sorry, we're not able to show the slides for today, but I'm more than capable of presenting without any need of slides or presentation. So the presentation that I had ready for you today was about my journey or my experience living in a very multicultural environment and using cultural intelligence to navigate this environment. I want to divide this presentation in three, where first I will introduce you to a story, like the story of my life, to present myself and introduce you to my journey on using multiculturalism. Then following that, I will try to explain you what cultural intelligence is as much as possible without the need of any slides and briefly, and then to conclude, I will just wrap up on cultural intelligence and their relationship with my journey with cultural multiculturalism, and maybe we just have some questions in the chat, and then I am able to answer any questions that you guys have for today. First of all, my name is, as have been mentioned a couple of times already, my name is Luciano Canton. I'm originally from Venezuela, but right now I'm living. I have been living abroad for 8 to 7 years so far. My journey started in England, where I went to learn English with actually a study mass. Thanks to Xavier. That was my first. That was my first experience with multiculturalism in the world. I had no English skills. I only spoke Spanish, and then I arrived to England in a classroom full of people from uh, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, where I had to just navigate talking with all of these different people in a language that I didn't know and trying to connect with them. This was my first experience with multiculturalism ever. My first reaction to it was just find any Venezuelans in the classroom and try to stick with them. That didn't work because still I was like forced to like be multicultural and engage with people from other cultures. And that experience, that like first experience there, was the one that opened my brain, opened myself to explore more countries, explore more cultures, explore more nations. And that was the beginning of my journey as a multicultural person. So following that, following England, I moved to Italy. In Italy, I live in a small town with where they speak Veneto, in the region of Veneto where they speak Veneto, not even actually uh, real Italian. And I had to understand their ways and their dialect. I was learning Italian in together with a group of refugees in a refugee school, where I was just trying to learn they didn't teach you only Italian, but they also had to teach you how the Italians do things, because it was not a language school. It was like for the refugees, so it was like incorporate you into the society school. Then I learned everything from culture, countries, the vocabulary, like the language, everything that they needed for you to integrate you into the society. That was a very nice experience. But after that, I decided to move to the happiest country in the world, which is Denmark. Had some friends living there. Also, Xavier promoted Denmark to me at the time, and that was my next. I decided that that was my next adventure to take. And let me tell you, living in Denmark is the most multicultural experience I could ever met, and the most multicultural challenge, because Denmark is the furthest thing away from my original culture, which was Venezuelan. It was the completely different reality for me. However, in my slides, I remembered that I had a quote, right, that I wanted to present to you, and the quote said the following. The quote said, let me see if I can remember it perfectly, but the quote said something like, that the multiculturalism or culture is a book, like a history book, or let's say it's a, let's call it a memory book. It is a memory book, and each culture that you meet in the way in your journey, each different person, different language, different multicultural that you learn is a page that you add to that book. Um, and these pages, let's call it, they're bridged together. They're all connected by a thin line because this culture is what connects us people. So I want to give a perfect example of this. And the perfect example of this multicultural journey was my first job in Denmark, which is funny enough. I was a pizza man. My first job in Denmark was as a pizza man, and the reason they hired me is because the owner of the pizzeria, he was Sicilian. He, he spoke perfect English, perfect English. He also spoke perfect Danish, but he needed someone that could understand him as his culture and translate that to other people working in the pizzeria because he was always like, hey, I'm at the pizza. You need to take it off the oven. Very expressive, very, let's say, talkative. Danes, they don't like that. Danes, they are very cold, very like silent, and this was a very expressive person. So he needed someone to connect and to understand him in a deeper level. And someone raised their hand. Feel free to speak up. Is perfect, perfect. Now I will continue then. Yeah, if you have any questions,
please, Luciano, anyone is allowed to ask or by voice. They have to write their questions on the chat. Okay. So
okay.
Hello everyone. If you have a question for Luciano, please put in the chat and we read it later. Okay. Thank you for that. So go on, Luciano. It's fantastic.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, perfect. Then like after that experience, let's say bridging this Italian person with the other people working in the pizzeria, I decided to take another challenge, and I applied for a job in like a corporate job. We're talking here in an office job, where my task will be to negotiate high-level contracts with the Italian people. I didn't expect to get the job. I just applied, sent, and I didn't expect to get the job at all. Like, why would they hire a Venezuelan guy when they can hire an Italian guy to do the job, right? Like, what is my advantage here? They interview my boss at the time. He told me like they interview 34 people, and I was the only one not Italian out of the 34 people they interviewed. And I was the one to get the job. And after that, I just sat down with my boss and I told him like, why did you give the job to me? Like, why is it the reason that you have 33 Italian people applying for the same job, where my Italian is not good. It's actually terrible. I have a very strong Spanish accent when I speak Italian. And he told me, because you're the most multicultural person out of those 33 Italians. All of them, they have studied in Italy, live in Italy, they know Italy very good, but they are not able to bridge cultures like you do. They're not able to understand Danes, understand how the other international cultures, and like bridge people together and be very like open-minded. And now I jump into the practicality of this that I'm telling about, right? Because all of this that I'm talking here, we have a definition, and it's called cultural intelligence. You might have heard of it before, might not heard of it at all, so I will just define it for you. Cultural intelligence is the ability to adapt to different cultural contexts. This can be to different nationalities, to different language, to different people, and just make like, let's call it like, take a switch every time you talk with a person from a different nationality. Know how to talk with them, know their values, know the way they do things. So cultural intelligence in principle, as this concept was introduced to me not so long ago, actually 2 years ago. And after that, I realized, like, okay, I've been doing that for the past 8 years of my life. But the cultural intelligence have three components. Right? The first component, it is knowledge, or like in scientific terms, I think they call it cognitive capacity. But for me, it's knowledge. The second term is called like the motivational belief, and the third term that will be the third term that will be the adapt, the behavioral, the behavioral side, like to adapt to the new culture that you face with. So let's put it like that. Like first, this is all connected. Let's put it like as a triangle. This is all connected. These three things, because the first thing is the knowledge. You need to understand. You need to know the different cultures. That could be like you need to know a little bit of their language. You need to know a little bit about their culture, like how they do things, where is the country located, where is their nationality. You need to have knowledge about this culture that you are trying to understand, right? The second thing, like which is like the most important thing for, in my opinion, is a motivational belief. It's a motivational factor. Actually, just yesterday, I was having a conversation with some friends, and they were saying like, "Oh, Luciano, but like, how can you learn a language? It's so easy for you. You need to maybe you are like a genius." And they're like, "No, it's not that you're genius. I didn't know if I would have stayed in Venezuela, I wouldn't learn English because I was not motivated for it. But it is the motivation that puts you there. When you are actually motivated to do it and you're pressured to do it, then you can learn it like this. It's just a matter of like a self-belief in that you can do it, and then it just takes months. There is actually a book, a theory about it that says that you are able to learn any language in 3 months if you're actually forced to do it. So it is a matter of having the right mindset, the right motivation, or being forced to it at the time. Because I'm the kind of person that I always get a little bit distracted with things. So for me, it needs to be forced, else I will not learn it. But the third thing is the adaptability, and one of the most complicated ones because every time you face a new culture, it's like a switch you have to pass. Like let's say, first you are speaking Spanish, then you need to go talk with someone in English. You need to pass that switch, and then you need to like enter into a different persona that knows the values, that knows the language, that knows the culture, and then like you need to talk with someone in Portuguese. You need to pass that switch again. And then you need to talk with someone in Danish or in Italian. That's a switch. You need to switch again and switch again. It is many people struggle with this, and then they can have like something like identity crisis, or like it can be very difficult to do. But the best strategy that have worked for me is that every time I want to switch to a different language or to a different culture from a different nationality, what I do is that I take 5 minutes. I read like an idiom, like it can be like I read something in a yellow paper. I just read like an idiom or something in English or something in Italian or something in Spanish. In Spanish, no, because it's my mother language, right? But I like something in a yellow paper, and that helps me enter into the zone of the language that I'm going to speak. And then like it's proof, it is scientifically proved that when you read like something complicated and trying to say it in another language, you can switch easier to the other language. But with the final thing, as I told you from my story, as I wanted to conclude from my story now, I also remember that I had a quote on my slide. So I said that bridging cultures is just not about of bridging you with someone else, because you expose is bi-directional. You're learning from that person, but that person is also learning from you. So there is like when you are bridging in the between cultures, when you're creating bridges, it's coming from both ways. And I'm pretty sure that at the end of the day, that person is gonna go home with an extra paper on their memory book from your culture, and you're gonna go home as well with an extra paper from that memory book with another culture. So And like as you saw in my story, and I'm gonna just finish it here. There was I managed to understand others' cultures, like so the knowledge. I managed to motivate myself to do it, and I managed to adapt to it. So that's what you need to do in your day-to-day to manage to reach cultural intelligence and work in a multicultural environment. And with that, I conclude.